Here we go. All right. Well, there was one person up there who didn't get a shout out that really deserves a shout out, and that was my wife, Leslie. This wouldn't have happened without her, with her doing lots of putting all the kids to bed so that I could do late nights reviewing all of this. But on a bigger, grander scale, I wouldn't be here without her. I didn't think this was gonna happen. She, she was a bulldog when I was sick, and she got us in with specialists that we shouldn't have ever been able to get in with. She drove me to all the appointments. She did the histories with all doctors because I couldn't remember what happened. And I couldn't remember basic words like mitochondria. Might not be a basic word to you, but to me, mitochondria is a very basic word, and I couldn't tell doctors that they had found mitochondrial dysfunction on my muscle biopsy. The word would not come to me. So she deserves the biggest shout out. And for any of you here who are here with a loved one or looking to support a loved one through this, you play a critical role in this, because if your loved one is sick and going through this, they can't do it on their own. They don't have the brain function. They're not the person to be able to do this. So if you're here supporting a loved one, give yourself a pat on the back. But it truly is life-changing for that person, and being able to be there for them is super important, because we're literally trying to, and we're going to talk about this, we're literally trying to make them a new person. We're trying to take them from this sick person and make them someone who is a different person, who's not sick, who doesn't have an autoimmune disease, who doesn't have brain fog, all of the things. And that's difficult. That's scary. It's hard. For them and for you, if you're married to them, or they're your child or your parent or whatever, to see them go through that change is hard, but they really need your help through that. So that is my kind of challenge to the support people here. And we're going to go over some research. So as you've kind of picked up, this is very outside of mainstream medicine. People always ask me, they're like, well, like, is there someone in Arizona that we can refer to, or someone in Minnesota who does this? I'm like, no, because I literally made this up. We combined a bunch of different things, and so there's not anyone that's doing this, because it doesn't exist anywhere else. But my goal is to kind of challenge your perception of reality, or your perception of how we heal, maybe how you've been conditioned from your parents, from your medical providers, from the news, all the things that are conditioning us to go, hey, we're this physical being, you're not better because you need a medication, or whatever. So we're going to challenge that today. So we're going to start just kind of at the very superficial top part of this, of we're not our biology only. And when we look at quantum physics, we actually see that the atoms, which obviously make up everything that we see in this room, including ourselves, are 99.99999999999999996 empty space. So everything that makes you up is primarily space. So if you think about an atom, and we were able to blow an atom up to the size where the nucleus was an apple, the electron cloud would be 1.25 miles that way. So that is the massive amount of space that builds this physical form that you and I see and touch and all that. We are just equipped with eyes that see the physical form, and we also have electrons that repel the other electrons, which is why when we touch our hand, we feel like we're touching something solid, when in fact you're not touching something solid, because there's only 0.00000000004% of you that is actually physical solid matter. And when we break that out further and look at, well, what makes up an atom, we have our nucleus, and then I said electron cloud. For anybody that remembers learning about the electrons in high school. All of you are old enough in here that they were still teaching electrons being this little particle that circled the nucleus. If you're in high school now, they don't teach that anymore, because they're focused more on the wave, because electrons act as waves when they're not being observed. When they're observed, that's when they turn into particles. So literally, from a quantum level, the electrons, which make up part of our building blocks, do not exist as physical matter until they are focused on. So that's what the double slot experiment looked at here. And what they did was they took two lasers, shined it through the little slots here, and without any kind of observation, it lands on the screen here in waves. So we have the multiple lines here showing that those come through as waves, just like if that was water and we dropped a pebble, the waves would go through, they'd show up on the other side and continue on. However, when you add a photon detector, everything turns right into like you're shooting a pea shooter through there. They all end up on the other side in exact form of the slots there, which tells us that electrons aren't a thing until we observe them. And we consciously know this to some level because everyone has stubbed their toe at one point and it was really painful and you were thinking about it, and then something else happened and you got distracted, and then a couple of minutes later you were like, oh yeah, my toe was hurting, and then it starts to hurt again. And that is because we literally went from being physical matter and hey, this is painful, to a wave and more energy, and then you went back to the physical. Now, I'm not saying we can meditate ourselves into this, just wave pattern, but it does change the actual structure. And my daughter, who is 4, is the perfect example of this because she can fall and scrape her knee and be completely fine. And 3 days later, you can ask her about it. She's like, "It was the worst thing ever. My knee's terrible." Might be a little different there. But, okay, so continuing on this challenge. So this is the really interesting experiment looking at kind of the first proof of the biofield. And what they did was they took 137 leaves, severed them, took the leaf away, and then used Kirlian photography or biophotonic photography to take a picture of the leaf. And the leaf still shows up even once the leaf is cut and taken away. They did it with, this has been done multiple times. This study in the Journal of Alternative Complementary Medicine in 2015 took 137 leaves, severed them, took an image with Kirlian photography, and 96, so 70% of them demonstrated the exact outline of the leaf even without the leaf being there. So if leaves that do not have nearly the complexity that we have in our nerves and our cellular structure is obviously much more complex than a leaf. If leaves have this leftover electricity and electromagnetic field that the Kirlian photography can pick up, imagine what we have. So as we talk about the electromagnetic field, the biofield, the HeartMath Institute has done a tremendous amount of research into all of this. They're the ones that really kind of pioneered heart rate variability. They're the reason you wear whoops and rings and all of that. And they measured our electromagnetic field from the heart at 3.5+ feet, depending on the type of device you're using. Some of the devices in Europe actually can measure it further than 3.5 feet, which means every single time the heart beats, it creates an electromagnetic field that can be picked up 3.5 feet away, which is well within your brain. The electromagnetic field that comes off of the heart is 60 times more powerful than the electromagnetic field that the brain creates. So our heart literally drives the electrical activity in the brain, and the brain waves are responsive to what's going on in the heart. The brain also emits EMFs. This was up for debate until 2022 when they were able to measure the electromagnetic frequency of the brain that was 2 feet away. So if we're all walking around with these big 3 foot, 3.5 foot electromagnetic fields, imagine what happens when we come in contact with someone else within that 3 foot or 7 foot radius, because now they also have 3.5 feet. So the HeartMath Institute did a really interesting study, and they have subject A over here. They're measuring brain waves, and we have a nice little sine wave, not a whole lot of change in the microvolts. And then they have subject B, where they're measuring their heart rate or their heartbeat and the electrical activity from their heartbeat. And they had them hold hands. And as soon as they held hands, subject A's brainwave matched subject B's heart rate. So we literally changed another person's brain waves by just holding hands and then linking up with our electromagnetic field coming off of our heart. Do you still think you're this just little lump of cells circling on the blue planet? Okay, so we're going to go further. Is everybody's brain hurting yet? Quantum entanglement. This was actually the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for proving quantum physics or quantum entanglement. They just did another one in Princeton in 2023, proving that when you can take two molecules and separate them, and once they've been together, you separate them, you induce an electrical or magnetic, some kind of force on this molecule over here, and this one, even though it's separated, will respond at the exact same time. These guys that won the Nobel Prize separated it by a kilometer. This was done in Germany. They separated those molecules by a kilometer, induced an electromagnetic pulse into this one. This one oscillated at the same time. We're not just a clump of cells. This is, I mean, most people know this one by now, but Masaru Emoto's study of looking at what our words and emotions do to water. So he took water molecules, put them on a slide, would speak positive words or negative words to them, freeze them, and then look at them under a microscope. So when you talk to water, as weird as that might be, and you say thank you, wisdom, you're truthful, you're eternal, all these great things, we get wonderful, beautiful little crystalline structures. However, when we go and call the water full, and you make me sick, you're evil, that water physically changes when you freeze it, and it doesn't become this beautiful geometric pattern. It goes into all of this disruptedness. You take polluted water and then pray over it, and that polluted water all of a sudden becomes nice and geometric. And we don't know what kind of prayers he was saying or who he was praying to, but the simple act of acknowledging that there is something else greater than us and that we aren't this little, just biological thing, was enough to change how polluted water froze. We're 60% water. So imagine what our continual talking of, I'm sick, I'm never going to get better, I have an autoimmune disease that is verified by all of these physicians, because I went and I paid a lot of money to see the best of the best physician, and he told me that I have an autoimmune condition. I saw the labs, I saw all of the diagnostic things, I read the articles, I read the research, I have X autoimmune disease. Imagine what that does to your cells. And when we look at self-talk, we have the conscious self-talk, and then we have what the subconscious is doing. So what the subconscious is doing is a whole lot more, because our subconscious runs 95 to 99% of our life. So Dr. Bruce Lipton is, the subconscious mind is 1 million times more powerful than the conscious mind and runs 95 to 99% of our lives, which is why you can't go, I don't have an autoimmune disease. I don't have an autoimmune disease. Boom, it's gone. It's because you're trying to overcome 95 to 99% of your brain that's saying, no, we were at that appointment. We saw the rheumatologist. He said you have it. You can say with 1% of your brain as much as you want to that you don't have an autoimmune disease, that you don't have mold toxicity, that you don't have Lyme. That 1% is not ever going to overcome the 99%. I said this in the documentary, but our brains process 11 million bits of information every second. We're aware of 40 of them. So that is a massive background information of the brain constantly running, going, hey, this is what your blood pressure is supposed to be. This is when the heart's supposed to be beating. You're secreting these enzymes right now. Oh, liver, you got to do your thing. Oh, and also, you're sick and you're not safe, and you have childhood trauma that taught you that you're not safe. So we need to be elevated. We need to be hypervigilant, and we can't ever swing into parasympathetic system, because at 7 years old, this happened, and now you're not safe for the rest of your life. You're not going to talk yourself out of it. So when we talk about the subconscious mind, we're talking about our beliefs, our long-term memories, our protective reactions, our imagination, our control of all systems, our programming, our fears, our intuition, values, emotions. So much in this subconscious and unconscious part of the brain. And when we switch to conscious, which we would like to think that we're, conscious beings and making all these decisions, which we can talk a whole nother time about, that we don't actually make our own decisions. But that's our logical thinking, our willpower, short-term memory, and critical thinking. There's substantial overlap between the physics. So this is really important for anyone that's undergoing biotoxin illnesses. So this is a study from 2021. They came to the conclusion that there's substantial overlap between the physiological abnormalities in PTSD and those observed in biotoxin illness. And this is particularly evident in dysregulation of the HPA axis, which is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, how we handle stress, and our autonomic tone. So that's sympathetic or parasympathetic. So when I say sympathetic, that's our fight or flight response. That's our like, oh my gosh, that guy cut me off in traffic. And the parasympathetic is the, whew, that was a really good turkey dinner. I'm just gonna like lay back on the couch and we're gonna let this all digest. If we can't get into that, like I'm just gonna relax and let everything digest, systemically, we don't actually start to heal. So biotoxin illness, meaning you've been exposed to a toxin, mold, Lyme, heavy metals, mercury, whatever you want to call it, will trigger the same sort of reaction as PTSD. And this is important because PTSD is pretty easy to look at its effects on the immune response. And the traditional medical model has acknowledged this for a long time. So there's a lot of research looking at PTSD, and there's a definitive link between PTSD and autoimmunity. And those with PTSD come with a whole host of immune cell dysregulation. Now, something really important to notice. Trauma is obviously our trigger for PTSD. You get trauma that turns into PTSD because of pre-existing vulnerabilities. So we have our genetics that make us more susceptible to develop PTSD from trauma, which is why you can have a veteran who goes to multiple wars and never develops PTSD. You have another veteran that goes right beside him and develops PTSD because there's a genetic predisposition to develop PTSD. That's where the genes end. Once you've developed PTSD, you're going right to autoimmune and inflammatory disease. It is not a predisposition. You aren't born with a predisposition for an autoimmune disease. You're born with pre-existing sensitivities that set your brain up to trigger that. So super important distinguishment there. The Journal of Clinical Pharmacology found that immune system changes in PTSD, we can also carry that over to biotoxins, include altered glucocorticoid sensitivity, target immune cells. It shifts your immune cells to further disruption. We get elevated pro-inflammatory cytokines, decreased regulatory T regulatory cells, which our T regulatory cells control our T cells. T cells are part of our inflammatory pathway. We get all sorts of problematic things. Th17 increase. We have increased CRP if you've been to a provider. That's kind of the first line thing that any doctor is going to run looking at your inflammatory levels. They're going to look at your increased C-reactive protein levels. So PTSD will trigger that as well. So if PTSD can alter the immune response, that means that it's the brain that's making the change, because we just proved back here that it's not the genes, because the genes set you up for PTSD. So if PTSD has a significant correlation with autoimmune disease, then the brain is what's triggering the autoimmune disease. And I challenge you to find a rheumatologist who's going to tell you that. So we can look at PTSD, but then we can also look at this little effect right here, which research tries to downplay the placebo effect. Their whole job is to pretty much get rid of the placebo effect, instead of going, oh my gosh, the placebo effect is this glaring showing of the brain's ability to heal the body. So when we look at a 2021 meta-analysis of 186 clinical trials, we found that an average of 54% of the overall treatment effect was attributed to placebo. That's a really big number. How many of your doctors have given you a medication and gone, it's a 50-50 shot. The medication might do it, you might do it. I'm willing to bet has never been heard. When we look at antidepressants, that number goes as high as 75%. Some studies say 84%. This is devastating. Think about all the people, I'm sure you have friends, family members, acquaintances who are on antidepressants post-COVID, right? That has shot up through the roof. The effect of that medication, which also doesn't have good clinical outcomes anyways, antidepressants are notorious for not working very well, only 25% of that is actually coming from the medication. The rest of that is any positive effect that we get from antidepressants. 75% of that is associated with the brain going, oh, my doctor gave me that. That's going to be the thing that fixed me. Boom, now I'm fixed. Imagine if our doctors, instead of putting somebody on an antidepressant, said, hey, we have significant understanding that your brain can heal yourself. So let's go through the process of getting your brain to work the way that it's supposed to, instead of giving you something that's only 25% effective and probably is going to give you this laundry list of side effects. If you can't tell, I get a little fired up about this. All right, so we're going to go even further because 50-50 for medications isn't fun enough. In 2002, New England Journal of Medicine found that a study on sham arthroscopic knee surgeries found exactly the same outcome between a group who actually had the arthroscopic surgery, so they actually went in, cleared out meniscal tissue, flushed things out, and those who had an incision that was just closed back up. 54%. Or sorry, no, this one's exact. And this isn't like, the Journal of, fluffy rainbows and all of that. This is the New England Journal of Medicine. Same thing when we talk about the British Medical Journal here. They found you were 50-50 shot of if we just cut you, you're going to also end up like the person that we actually go in and physically remove tissue from the knee, create significant inflammation, and do all of this. You're going to come out exactly the same. Here's your really big bill, and go do your weeks of PT, and check back with me in 8 weeks, and you're going to do just as well as the person that we did a little slice and stitched back up. British Medical Journal in 2014 found that half of all sham surgeries, not just knee surgeries, all sham surgery studies, I think this was 54 studies were used here, yielded outcomes that were just as good as the actual surgery. So authors of this concluded this with, we need better screening techniques so we aren't doing surgery on the people that would have got better on their own. Instead of going, oh my gosh, half of the people, or like just as many people got better when we did a sham surgery as when we did real surgery and altered their anatomy. They go, well, we just need to screen out those crazy people because they clearly didn't need surgery in the first place. All right. Patients are patients because they are out of rapport with their own unconscious. Great little quote there. Okay, so how do we develop this rapport with the subconscious? Systematic review in 2017. Meditation reduced cortisol, C-reactive protein, blood pressure, heart rate, triglycerides, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Could you imagine if a medication did that? That would be all over prime time. There would be so many people talking about this medication. Everybody would be jumping on the bandwagon for this medication. That's a lot. Cortisol, C-reactive protein, blood pressure, heart rate, triglycerides, tumor necrosis factor. When we look at mind-body therapies, those decrease the expression of inflammation-related genes. We're not just talking about you went and meditated and you felt better for a little bit because your inflammation went down. We changed the genes that were expressing the inflammation. Okay, a review of 20 studies with 1,600 participants, and researchers concluded that mindful meditation appears to be associated with a reduction in pro-inflammatory processes, increases in cell-mediated defense parameters, and increases in enzyme activity that guards against cell aging. So I have a fun little story about cell aging and meditations. After I went through my whole process and we started treating, I was like, oh, you know what? My quads are actually way smaller than they used to be. That's kind of depressing. I wonder what happened at a cellular level. So I did a telomere test. For those of you who don't know, that's how we measure cellular aging. My telomere test came back as a 57-year-old. I'm not 57. So that was really disappointing. This was last year, and I was like, okay, well, we're seeing some really cool things here. I wonder if I can reverse my cellular aging because I reversed all these other symptoms. I just got those results back 3 weeks ago. My telomere length is now consistent with someone that's 41. In 1 year, meditating twice a week, we reversed 16 years of cellular damage. If that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. Okay, meditation opens the door between the conscious and subconscious mind. It's how you rewrite the program. So this is what I'm talking about, and that we are literally taking you from this avatar of being the sick person with Lyme, with mold, an autoimmune disease, and we are making you a completely different person. And the way we're doing that is we're rewiring your brain and rewiring your subconscious. So your subconscious can stop that background story of you're this sick person, you're the person that has, pick your autoimmune disease, lupus, MS, whatever, to you are now the person that does not have that anymore. How great is that? So when we think of the biofield, being the constant feedback to the subconscious, reaffirming all of the beliefs of being sick, this is why meditation by itself doesn't reverse autoimmunity. This is why you don't see all of the meditation studios walking people out the door that have cured their MS. It's because if your biofield is walking around going like this, the subconscious is reading that constantly and going, yeah, we do have that. Doesn't matter what we try to do. Doesn't matter how well we get into a deep meditative state. We're still this. So we're going to just kind of continue to reaffirm that. As we can start to change the biofield and then go into our meditations, the brain goes, ooh, wait a second. Something's different. We've got different electrical activity. If we have different electrical activity, then we can be something different. And we get to each time make a slightly better functioning person. The brain wants to return to homeostasis. So if we can remove those blocks, if we can point the brain, the subconscious, in the correct location or the correct direction, that will allow the brain to do what it's meant to do. So this is why we get the results that we get. So a couple of months ago, I had just several patients that were like, the meditations that I do here are like wild, and as you saw from the from the documentary, tornadoes come out of your ear. This is my favorite part of it, one of the favorite parts of the documentary. But I was like, okay, well, we need to see what is happening in these meditations compared to a standard meditation. Why are patients able to achieve this level of a meditation by literally just having them sniff an essential oil while they're holding a couple of energetic vials in their hand? What is happening? So we got our EEG company to extend their protocol and run 10-minute protocols. So this top one here, we have multiple of these, but this was a fun one to show. This top one is a regular standard meditation. So this is with the Huso. This is a sound therapy device. They're sitting there meditating. And we're looking at the brain's coherence. So we're looking at all these different parts of the brain that should be connected and communicating. This person has a lot of red and a lot of yellow. Ideally, we want everything to be nice and blue and green connected here in the middle. So even in trying to get into a meditative state, their brain's still going. And then session 2 is right after we treat them. 30 minutes later, we treat them, go back into the meditation. Row 1 is looking at the way that the reports come out. Row 1 is the raw data. Row 2 is what changed in the raw data. So this is still this down here, plus these changes. So all of these changes are all blue, and they're all in the posterior aspect of the brain. Guess where the subconscious lives? So all of this is proof that we significantly decreased and slowed down their theta and their alpha brain waves and allowed that connectedness in the brain to go from hyperconnection to regular connection, which means all of a sudden now alpha brain waves, theta brain waves, beta brain waves are able to work the way they're supposed to in that meditation, which is why we get different results when we meditate compared to when you're trying to meditate at home, even using Huso and other sound therapy devices. So this is a cumulative of the data that we have so far. This first one is our meditations before treatment. Ideally, we want our coherence as close to 1 as possible. So before biofield treatments, 0.5 and 5. After biofield treatment, we go back into that same meditation, and our alpha brain waves jump up to 0.75, our theta coherence jumps up to 0.8, which is pretty exciting. So imagine if you were able to do this multiple times a week, paired by doing this at home. That is what helps guide the brain into this state of like, ooh, we're a new person. And also, I just fixed my biofield that went into complete retraction in the face of Lyme or mold or mycotoxins or my own cells. And now I can spend the next 30 minutes as I'm sitting in these really high coherent brainwave states to allow the brain to go, okay, how do we get to homeostasis now? How do we fix this going forward? Pretty exciting. All right. So hopefully you guys retained like 20% of that. I know I talk really fast, but I wanted to open this up for